Welcome, everyone. I'm Michael Robertson, president of the William Morris Society in the United States, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this talk by Monica Bowen. Monica received her MA in Art History and Curatorial Studies from Brigham Young University in 2008. She's taught art history at Seattle University and Central Washington University since 2010. I met Monica earlier this year, thanks to her very active service on the William Morris Society of the United States Board of Directors. I had the pleasure of hearing her talk on Morris and Kehinde Wiley, the subject of her talk tonight, when she first delivered it at the College Art Association meeting in February. Everyone who heard it there was eager for her to represent it for an even bigger audience. I read her very interesting piece on the pre-Raphaelites and Victorian radicalism in the current issue of Useful and Beautiful, which will shortly be coming to all of you who are members of the William Morris Society. And I'm a fan of Monica's art history blog, Alberti's Window, at albertis-window.com. Monica has worked as a docent at the Seattle Art Museum for almost 10 years and has enjoyed teaching the public about Kehinde Wiley and William Morris through different exhibitions hosted at the museum over the course of her time there. She currently serves as the adult tour training chair for the docent body. Recently, Monica has been a guest speaker at the Seattle Art Museum and at the Modern Language Association, speaking on the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood and William Morris. Tonight, her talk is The Bittersweet Sensations of William Morris and Kehinde Wiley. Monica, thanks so much for talking to us tonight.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen so that you can see what I would like to show you. Is that visible? Looks like it is. Wonderful. I thought that before I read my presentation talk to you, I would give a little bit of an explanation about Kehinde Wiley. And because I know that with different people coming to this particular presentation, we have people with various interests in William Morris. Some are in literature, some interests are in politics. And so you may not be familiar with this particular contemporary artist. Kehinde Wiley's an American artist from California. And he's been successful in the contemporary world for some time. For several decades, but he really caught the attention of the public recently when he received the commission to paint Barack Obama's presidential portrait. So that was unveiled in 2018. His art highlights the effects of the African diaspora in the sense that he travels around the world and he paints different people, particularly those of African descent. That's a particular interest for him. And this international focus even ties into his own personal life. As I said, he's an American artist and his mother is African American, but his father is from Nigeria. So he has an international background that way too. Some of you may even be familiar with his work in conjunction with the William Morris Gallery. There was an exhibition there last year. Unfortunately, it began just right before the pandemic broke out. But you can see some of that exhibition. It's called the Yellow Wallpaper. There's a Google Arts website that covers that exhibition, and that shows some women from East London in Dalston. So that's a little bit of an introduction to this particular artist. This is my presentation, The Bittersweet Sensations of William Morris and Kehinde Wiley. At first mention, the contemporary American painter Kehinde Wiley and the 19th century British designer William Morris could not seem more different. Both of their respective cultural backgrounds. Oh, I'm realizing, excuse me, I wanted to put this in a slide view. There we go. Now you'll be able to see a little bit better. At first mention, the contemporary American painter Kehinde Wiley and the 19th century British designer William Morris could not seem more different, both in their respective cultural backgrounds and historical eras. However, these two artists share some similarities in their aesthetic tastes and practices. The starting points for this analysis are the designs produced by Morris and Company, William Morris's firm, which Kehinde Wiley incorporated into several of his painted portraits of Black people. Wiley explained that his paintings, which often juxtapose Black portraits and European designs, create what he calls, quote, bittersweet sensations, end quote, because of the, quote, two oppositional forms rubbing together, end quote. An analysis of images by Kehinde Wiley and William Morris, as well as an exploration of the politics of their respective times, reveal that both artists are similar in their blending of oppositional elements that are new and old, progressive and traditional, and ultimately bittersweet. Kehinde Wiley and William Morris depict new and old oppositions by addressing social issues contemporary to their day and age with visual features that recall the past. Kehinde Wiley sees William Morris as a part of that historical past and uses what he calls, quote, the DNA of William Morris for the backgrounds for many of his designs. Some of Wiley's backgrounds are nearly direct copies of Morris and Company designs. And I'm sorry, for just one moment, I need to fix my cursor. It's not allowing me to move and slide and see my presentation. So just one moment, I'm sorry. Let me get back over here. Some of Wiley's backgrounds are nearly direct copies of Morris and Company designs, such as Wiley's Naomi and Her Daughters, which is based off of Morris's Compton design, or Wiley's Mrs. Waldorf Astor, which copies the pattern of Golden Lily. For this painting, the only difference is that Wiley's background is a mirror image reversal of the original print's orientation. Other paintings are loosely inspired by Morris, such as the sawtooth edges of the carnation petals in Anthony of Padua, which fold upward in a manner that recalls William Morris's design of carnations in pink and rose. And if you look at up in this area, particularly, you can see some of the petals are quite flat and they fold upward quite directly. And you can, if you look closely at Kehinde Wiley's design, you can see similar petals that are folding upward and have a similar look in their appearance. Wiley's bright color palette adds a unique sense of newness and contemporary vibrancy to these Morris and Company designs. Both artists look to tradition and the historical past to encourage social progress. Kehinde Wiley's paintings are both new and old as a means to raise awareness of social issues in a poignant way. His portraits depict people who are often wearing the latest urban street fashion. They maintain poses that mimic traditional paintings and sculptures from past centuries. The bittersweet sensation expressed is that Black figures were excluded as celebratory subjects in the majority of Western portraits and paintings. By using the designs that copy or evoke expensive arts and crafts, wallpaper, and textiles, Wiley challenges racist assumptions that notions of cultural refinement could be limited to a specific racial identity. Through composition, background design, and the anachronistically bright color palette, Wiley turns a historical past that never existed into a bittersweet contemporary reality. William Morris also looked to a historical past, but with a sense of longing for a medieval past that actually existed. However, like Kehinde Wiley, William Morris should not be called a true escapist because he looked to the world around him for inspiration and responded to current issues of his day. Morris's nostalgia was centered in a longing for a pre-industrial, pre-capitalist society in response to the rise of manufactured production during the Industrial Revolution. And like Kehinde Wiley, William Morris was concerned with social issues of marginalization and exclusion, but specifically the marginalization of craftsmen who create quality decorative arts by hand. Morris created a bittersweet opposition of present and past in multiple ways. He grounded his present reality by looking to the natural world around him, but with the aim to use natural substances to create traditional historical dyes. Furthermore, he engaged in contemporary issues through the production of handmade products, which contain designs that evoke an earlier time. The styles of Morris and Company designs are in what Morris called, quote, the quote, crispness and abundance of detail, which was the especial characteristic of fully developed medieval art, end quote. This crispness can be seen in the flat forms, clear lines, and intricate details of pink and rose, as well as Compton. Wiley and Morris not only looked to the past, but also to the future. Several Morris and Company backgrounds appear in the paintings from the Wiley exhibition in New Republic, which ran from 2015 to 2017, such as Shantavia Beale II, which has the same background design of honeysuckle. In the introduction of the exhibition catalog, Eugene Tsai explained that, quote, Wiley's vision of what constitutes a new republic, the title he chose for this exhibition, cannot help but appear corrective, even utopian, with its embrace of differences in gender, sexual orientation, and culture, using the power of images to remedy the historical invisibility of Black men and women as subjects and producers of culture, end quote. This political language and reference to utopia overlaps well with the aims of William Morris, who opposed capitalism and advocated for socialism in his writings, including his utopian novel, News from Nowhere. These political views influenced his daughter, Mae Morris, who also became a socialist and was the designer of honeysuckle. Steve Edwards described William Morris's utopian aims as, quote, the recovered wholeness of men and women, of their relations to their fellows and to nature, end quote. The realization of such a utopian future requires effort, however, and this message is manifest in oppositional, competing compositional elements in Morris and Company designs that suggest static structure and dynamic movement. Social solidarity and organization is expressed through the design's repetition, replication, and what William Morris called the thicker parent stock that helped to unify the design. And if you look here at honeysuckle, you can see that there's this thicker stem that is leading through this portion of the design that would be what we would call this parent stock, holding the design together, we could say, with other offshoots of the design, and in this case, the plant coming from that central place. This helps to unify the design. Yet the plants contain dynamic, wild turns and twists, which connects to the socio-political, quote, struggles of human existence, end quote, that Caroline Arscott has observed in these designs. Kehinde Wiley's most impactful paintings are those which include Morris and Company designs that are oppositionally structured and dynamic, as they can further the message of a dynamic change to build a structured and utopian future. Another parallel that can be drawn between Kehinde Wiley and William Morris is their use of oppositions between depicted subject matter and contextual display, since both artists depict subjects that are incongruous with their intended spaces. For example, the designs produced by Morris and Company are inspired by nature, such as leaves, vines, stems, and flowers, primarily those found outdoors. William Morris's depictions of plants were unusual for his day and age because he focused on plant forms that were local to his area instead of exotic or tender plants that were popular due to the rise of state-of-the-art glass greenhouses. Instead, Morris highlighted local plants found outside in British forests, fields, hedgerows, and his own garden, and that influence can be seen in Mae Morris's design of honeysuckle, which evokes the plants of an English cottage garden. Yet ironically, the intended space for Morris and Company designs is the indoors, not the outdoors. In his 1881 lecture, Some Hints on Pattern Designing, Morris explained that, quote, it will be enough for us to clothe our daily and domestic walls with the ornament that reminds us of the outward face of the earth, end quote. By selecting elements from nature, yet intending for these elements to appear as decoration of an interior space, Morris created an oppositional juxtaposition between natural and man-made environments, which creates a bittersweet sense of dislocation. Likewise, Wiley also raises a similar bittersweet reaction of displacement, although the indoor and outdoor Maurician spaces are further complicated on a societal level to raise awareness of cultural insiders and outsiders. To start, Kehinde Wiley's tactic of street casting for models draws a parallel with Morris looking outdoors for inspiration. To find models, Wiley goes out to the street looking for ordinary people who he thinks would work well for his paintings. In the case of Anthony of Padua, Wiley found someone walking along the streets of New York. However, due to the size of Wiley's large-scale paintings, these portraits of ordinary people must be displayed in large indoor spaces, such as a spacious gallery, implying a connection to elitist wealth due to the grand space required. This indoor and outdoor opposition is furthered because the portraits depict marginalized others who historically have been excluded from privileged museum spaces due to race. The Morris and Company designs in Wiley's paintings add to this bittersweet oppositional disconnect because Wiley does not place the wallpaper designs on their intended location, an actual physical wall, but places the design within the fictive wall of the canvas and then places the canvas on the physical wall. And instead of the continuous and repetitive wallpaper scroll that was produced by Morris and Company, Wiley's designs are naturally cropped by the canvas and frame, as seen in this image of Mrs. Siddons by Wiley, which copies the Morris and Company design of Blackthorn. As a result, such Morris and Company designs, when placed on a transportable canvas, allude to space and belie a specific location. Wiley is aware of this disconnect and explains on his website, quote, "Most of the backgrounds I end up using are sheer decorative devices, things that come from things like wallpaper or the architectural facade ornamentation of a building. And in a way, it robs the painting of any sense of place or location, and it's located strictly in an area of the decorative," end quote. This conflicting visual message about space conveys bittersweet messages of opposition. Spatially, the Black figures can be interpreted as residing anywhere and nowhere at the same time. This ambiguous setting, therefore, heightens the connections that previously have been made between Wiley's portraits and contemporary political issues of harboring refugees and welcoming immigrants into Europe. During a 2016 to 2017 exhibition at the Petit Palais in Paris, Wiley acknowledged the sensitivity of displaying his paintings in France due to the rise of far-right politics, which endorsed the closing of borders to outsiders. In an interview, Wiley spoke critically of such political actions across the globe and said, quote, "Europe has been a place of refuge. Why should it stop with Black and brown bodies?" End quote. The bittersweet opposition of displacement is therefore highlighted with Maurician backgrounds, since the Black figures are depicted in a space, but restricted to only one part of the picture plane due to the dense background. William Morris once compared pattern design to the stronghold of a fortress, and pointing out that a design should not be weak. In this dual context of represented space and restriction, Wiley's backgrounds suggest a fortress-like backdrop that highlights and restricts his Black figures, creating a visual competition which emphasizes the presence of racial inequality and inequity surrounding immigration and systemic racism. To further this opposition, Wiley uses Morris and Company designs in a way that creates visual opposition by suggesting a welcome caress and restricting confinement. In Wiley's paintings, a few elements of the design, such as select plant vines, leaves, or stalks, emerge from the background and are superimposed on top of the sitter. And you can see some of these designs especially well, I think, that have come up here in front of her white gown. The layering of imagery can be interpreted in different oppositional ways. In a recent review of a Kehinde Wiley exhibition, artist and writer David Mabb argued that the parts of the patterns that extend from the background present a gentle, quote, caress of inclusion, end quote, suggesting a harmony between the subject and background. However, the pattern also can be interpreted as imprisoning or restricting the fully modeled three-dimensional sitter from emerging forward to fully interact with the viewer outside the picture plane. As a result, due to the compositional layering of elements and oppositional stylistic techniques of flat and illusionistic imagery, Wiley's sitters are placed in a context that suggests both a welcome caress and a restrictive spatial barrier. Visually, differences in technique create another opposition within Wiley's paintings. The pattern backgrounds in Wiley's paintings are done with a tightness and technical precision that are different from the looser, more emotive brushstrokes that are used from the central figures. And you can, I think, see that especially well in this detail with the tightness and technical precision. This is because the background details in Wiley's paintings are typically assigned to Wiley's dozens of assistants. Wiley prefers to focus his attention on painting the figures themselves. It has been argued that Wiley's assistants exhibit greater technical skill than Wiley himself, prompting writer Christian L. Frock to raise questions, quote, about the role of cheap labor in the production of sky-high expensive art, end quote, that is sold and exhibited under only Wiley's name. This issue of Wiley's use of assistants raises another oppositional and bittersweet layer to both Wiley and Morris's work, since both artists' careers have complicated relationships with commercialism and capitalism. Wiley's paintings are a complicated challenge to the history of social oppression of minorities, since Wiley's art relies on the long-standing cultural system of workshop production, using underrepresented, often anonymous assistants. These assistants work across the globe in studios that Wiley has admitted are cheaper to maintain due to their locations. In this way, there are contradictions in Wiley's work that create opposing, bittersweet undercurrents of his challenge to cultural oppression. This is a contradiction of which Wiley seems aware. He expressed discomfort in discussing the topic of his assistants to a New York Magazine journalist by simply explaining, quote, "I'm sensitive to it," end quote. And while workshop production and collaboration was a tenet of the Morris and Company production, William Morris also stands out as the primary figure to receive credit for the work produced. Some of the famous Morris and Company designs were created by others, such as Morris's daughter Mae Morris or John Henry Durrell. One such popular design, which sometimes is misattributed to William Morris, is Blackthorn by Durrell, which was created in 1892 for Morris and Company. This is a design which Kehinde Wiley has used more than once, and it appears in Mrs. Siddons as well as in the painting St. George and the Dragon, and recently in the portrait of Dorinda Essa from 2020. Kehinde Wiley also uses Durrell's design Iris for the background of St. John the Baptist. With the knowledge that these backgrounds were painted by Wiley's assistants, there is a bittersweet juxtaposition of underrepresented artists in the background, both in design by Durrell and also in execution by Wiley's assistants. The patterns created by Morris and Company, and then by extension Kehinde Wiley, demonstrate oppositional elements of the original and the copy. Through the replication of a pattern template, these designs, quote, denote an original that is also a copy, or perhaps a copy that is also original, end quote. An idea recently explored by Elizabeth Carolyn Miller, who argues that the devaluation of originality parallels Morris's focus on workshop production and collaboration. Kehinde Wiley's appropriation of these backgrounds adds another layer of this bittersweet opposition of the copy and the original, since the backgrounds in his paintings copy the composition of the designs created by Morris and Company, and these designs sometimes, but not always, are by William Morris himself. The bittersweet oppositions in Kehinde Wiley and William Morris's work culminate in their audience and buyers. Despite the high ideals of both artists in promoting accessibility and equality in society and culture, their work was and is purchased by those who could afford it. William Morris was frustrated by this, having exclaimed at one point, quote, "I spend my life ministering to the swinish luxury of the rich," end quote. In a 2013 interview, Kehinde Wiley also pointed out the irony that his paintings, quote, are high-priced luxury goods for wealthy consumers, end quote, despite that they elevate the importance of average and underrepresented people. Instead, he sees his art within the bittersweet opposition of duality. As someone who has an identical twin brother, Wiley expressed that he believes, quote, it's possible to hold twin desires in your head, such as the desire to create painting and destroy painting at once, a desire to look at a Black American culture as underserved, in need of representation, a desire to mine that said culture and to lay its parts bare and to look at it almost clinically, end quote. To conclude, opposition is found in the work of both Kehinde Wiley and William Morris. Both of these artists used elements of past and present, combining historical styles with the issues of their day to create oppositional, bittersweet notions in their art. By using the backgrounds of William Morris, Kehinde Wiley's powerful images of Black figures have even greater presence and relevance in the meanings they convey about elitism, displacement, racism, and dynamic social change. Morris said that, quote, all the change and stir about us is the sign of the world's life, and that will lead to the bettering of all mankind, end quote. Kehinde Wiley's paintings bring about an awareness of the bitter past of exclusion, but William Morris aptly found a sweet silver lining in looking to history for change, noting that the past is not dead, it is living in us and will be alive in the future, which we are now helping to make, end quote. Thank you very much. These are my images.
Thank you, Monica.
Yes.
So,
Thank you.
Thanks so much. So we already have one question in the chat. I'll begin reading those questions in just a moment. But I did want to also mention that before the talk began, we asked people to just put into the chat how you learned about this event. We're very interested in increasing our reach to spreading the good news of William Morris as broadly as possible. So if you have not yet typed into the chat how you heard about this event, please do that. So let me take the privilege of actually posing the first question before I go to what we have in chat. Monica, many, or at least some of the people here tonight may be aware that in 2015, Jeremy Deller, the Turner Prize winning British artist, staged an exhibition at the Birmingham Art Museum in the UK about comparing Morris and Co. to Andy Warhol's workshop, Andy Warhol's factory. And you brought up really interesting questions tonight about originality. Deller is very interested in issues of the artist workshop and capitalism. You did not mention him, but as we know, Yinka Shonibari, who also heavily influences or heavily references Morris in his work, similarly uses a workshop to construct his works. So I wonder if you want to just begin by reflecting on the issues of the workshop, originality, capitalism, the place of the artist.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And I'm not familiar with this exhibition you were mentioning at Birmingham. I'll need to look into that. But it's an interesting thing to bring up, and just I'm not sure, as I said, what was in that show, but thinking about Andy Warhol and workshop production, some of you may be familiar with his they're called piss paintings, where he and his assistants would urinate on a metal plate, and then through this oxidation of the caustic urine, a painting would be produced. And I'm specifically thinking about that one in the context of assistance, because there's this idea of physical presence with those paintings because of the assistants being physically there and leaving a very physical mark in that context. And sometimes with workshop productions, you can really get that sense of a physical person being there and helping to create the art. And one thing I think is so fascinating about Kehinde Wiley and his approach with assistants is that he chooses to have his assistants paint with this technical precision so that you can't see their brushstrokes and you don't get that same mark of a physical presence and a physical person being involved in the process. Now with William Morris, there's something different, I think, at play because he's using block printing, for example, and you don't have that same, even though there's physical application and work that's involved in manual labor. Kehinde Wiley's paintings, I think, take it to a different, interesting level because we don't see those loose brushstrokes. It almost removes that physical presence of the assistants, and so that I think ties into this bittersweet notion of assistants being there but also not being there at the same time. And it's a tricky situation, especially when artists are not represented or assistants are not represented in their work. And it's exhibited only under a person's name that further removes that that connection. So it's a fascinating topic, and thank you for bringing that up.
Well, thanks. Here's again a nice general question. Can you talk about how Wiley came to use William Morris backgrounds, because there are other Wiley portraits that do not use Morris backgrounds?
Yes, that's a very good question. And I think it depends on the portrait, and I think the overall effect that he's trying to create. And we have to consider that what Wiley has said about these paintings is he's looking for a specific decorative effect. And so sometimes I'm thinking, for example, of Barack Obama's presidential portrait. It has that dense foliage and background, which kind of recalls William Morris, but at the same time, it doesn't have a specific Morrisian or Morris and Company design, which in the case of President Obama, that makes sense. You would start to make some tricky political statements if you copied a British designer being an American president. But there are some paintings which don't, and they'll have other types of decorative elements which suggest wallpaper. But he's interested in also exploring messages regarding, for example, masculinity. So he may choose some backgrounds to that he feels convey that better, that suggest more of a Baroque feeling of dramatic or drama that may convey ideas of masculinity or raise questions about how masculinity should be defined. And I noticed another question kind of along those lines about that Christopher June is bringing up about why he might be choosing specific wallpaper or textile patterns. It's something I would love to explore more and think about. Even if Wiley says that he is choosing these patterns for decorative purposes, I do think that meanings and associations could still be brought in thinking about the flowers that he's choosing and why he's using them in specific contexts, or even using backgrounds by William Morris in specific contexts. In fact, the image I showed, I can share my screen again to go back here. The image that I was showing of this one by Durrell with Iris is St. John the Baptist in the Wilderness, is a painting from a series that was dedicated to when Wiley went across the world and painted different portraits of people. This one connects to Jamaica, and another writer brought up this issue of we could explore British colonialism in conjunction with Jamaica and talk about those meanings. But from Wiley's perspective, it doesn't seem like he's interested in that or has thought about it. But there's still things that I think could be explored. I know of one artist whose name is Bethany Collins, who is interested in thinking about florography and the meaning of flowers in connection with wallpaper. It's still in the theme of race and identity. And so, there are other artists that are doing it, and I would be interested in taking that further with Wiley's work and thinking about the associations he's raising, whether or not he's consciously incorporating them into his paintings.
Thank you. A specific question, Monica. Mrs. Simmons, is that modeled after Gainsborough's portrait of the actress Sarah Simmons?
I believe that one is. I saw that question too, and you probably can do a Google search and find if that's the same compositional connection, but I believe that it is, because he often will take the composition of a famous painting or sculpture or one by a well-known artist, and you will even sometimes use the exact title of that painting as the title for his painting too, so that connection is clear. And I believe that's the case for this particular one. Sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he'll actually include the name of the sitter of the portrait, but sometimes he'll instead use the other title, which is, I showed you another one, Anthony of Padua, which is another one that's referencing a traditional work of art.
We, Monica, two more very interesting questions have come up. First, from Florence Booz. Morris & Co. did scrupulously record the name of its designers. Is Wiley planning to release the names of its assistants? Because Morris did not sign with his name designs known to be by others.
That is a great question. I don't know if Wiley plans to do that. I know of one artist who has put on his website that he's worked as an assistant for Kehinde Wiley. His name is Jason Bryant, and that's the only one that I know of myself. There is one, I know that there's one assistant mentioned in an article who is listed as Zach. So some artist out there named Zach is working for Wiley, but I kind of wonder if there's some type of non-disclosure, agreement that is being brought up with Wiley's assistants working for him, because he's such a well-known name. And he's already sensitive to this issue about money and payment and having assistants. So, it would be interesting to see. I feel like transparency is something that's valued so much in the 21st century, and it would draw some further interesting parallels with William Morris if that was the case.
Thank you. A question from Peter Stansky. What do you make of the contrast of the quality of the color in Wiley and Morris? The Wiley versions seem rather harsh colors. The Morris colors more subtle.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I think they can be seen as harsh or perhaps garish. They're very bright and vibrant, and I see that as a way for Kehinde Wiley to set himself apart from William Morris and really emphasize that this is a contemporary issue that he's wanting to address, and wanting to have that be a contemporary reality in the minds of the viewer, not just something that is inspired by the past or connected to the past, but really is that these figures are very living and palpable, and hopefully relatable too, that those who are looking at these images can think about contemporary issues. So I see that as a very conscious choice to help him set himself apart from his artistic predecessors, but also to make the painting seem more vibrant and relatable.
Could I link what you just said to a question come up? Is there, do you think his bright colors have anything to do with race? There's a question, I'd like to see you discuss the question of race in the body of the work of both.
Race with both artists?
Yeah,
or...
you did discuss it with Wiley quite a bit, but I guess the issue is perhaps to connect Morris.
Yeah, and thinking about race, this is something I was thinking about just yesterday as I was reviewing information and preparing for today. I know of one situation or context in which William Morris discusses Africa, and I was thinking about that, and if I could bring it in. It's in News from Nowhere in chapter 15. He's talking about the world market, and he makes a passing comment about Africa. But the context of the situation is that he's thinking about the expanding of the world market, and that there's an overproduction of goods that are being made in England, and as a result, they have this desire to expand with colonial expansion to Africa in order to have, excuse me, more people purchase those goods. And so, you know, in thinking about that, I was thinking, well, can I connect that to Africa? I don't know if because I feel like William Morris was thinking about colonialism more from an economic standpoint in the text that way. And I see Kehinde Wiley as being more interested in thinking about racial identity and those issues instead. I'm very much aware and conscious of thinking about British imperialism, though, that's taking place at this time and how that can connect to race and issues of race. But I think that's something that needs to be explored more and thought about with William Morris. And that's one thing that I'm actually interested in doing, in looking for more of those connections and thinking about that.
Oh, thank you. Here's a nitty-gritty question. Doesn't Morris and Company own those designs? Does Wiley have copyright?
Oh, that is a good question. I don't know if that would be an issue. And just thinking about the artistic changes that he is doing, you know, by changing the colors, I think there was probably enough there that he could count that as being his own work of art. And some, you know, that's a really good question, but I don't think that there's any type of copyright that he's needing to pay. And he modifies several of the designs too, even just changing, like I mentioned, there's a mirror reverse image for one of the paintings. I think that's enough to skirt around any type of a copyright issue, if that's the case. I've never looked into that, but if anyone does know about that, I'd be interested.
We're getting a lot of comments on that in chat, so I will see the chat.
Great.
Following. There's also a question: do the assistants have any role in the composition of the work? Jeff Koons, for example, works with assistants, but they simply execute his designs.
As far as I know, the assistants are executing the designs, and this is Kehinde Wiley's own vision, and he's kind of relegating that background work to them so that he can, and telling them what to do, but then he's focusing primarily on the figures themselves. That's as far as I know. I've never found anything to indicate otherwise.
Great, thank you. We'll pause just a moment. I think we have addressed, Monica, the questions. They seem to be paused now, and we're near the end of the time we had allotted for this. So I want to first, we'll finish in just a couple of minutes. I want to begin. Can we give a thumbs up or applaud or the hand icon that you can put in the screen for a really excellent talk? Thank you, Monica. I feel so lucky. I've gotten to hear this twice, and it's a talk that is so rich. I got so much more out of it hearing this again. I hope. Last question. Do you have plans to publish this?
Oh, maybe. I'd be interested in doing that. And I think, you know, tying into the other questions that were asked about looking for like specific meanings with flowers or what have you, I think I might even like to take it further, and then consider publication. Great.
So I just want to say thank you all for coming, and I want to announce our upcoming events. On May 26th, we'll be having a celebration of the 50th anniversary of the William Morris Society of the United States. We'll have a panel with Florence Booz, Mark Samuels Lasner, and Barbara Dunlap, who were there at the beginning or nearly, despite their youthfulness. They're going to give us an insight into that 50-year history. We, in June, on June 27th, we'll be having a celebration of the Kelmscott Press. As you know, this is the 125th anniversary of the Kelmscott Chaucer and the 130th anniversary of the establishment of the Kelmscott Press. So that's coming up on June 27th, and on June 26th, the day before, it's International Kelmscott Press Day, which will be celebrated by dozens of institutions around the globe, including the William Morris Society of the US. And in July, Philip Vinning, the former secretary of the Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings, will be giving a fascinating talk on Morris and architectural preservation. So if you are subscribed to Eventbrite or become a member of the William Morris Society, we will certainly let you know about those. I want to close by saying in our 50th anniversary year, we have greatly stepped up our programming. We are also stepping up our benefits to members. As always, you get twice a year the Journal of William Morris Studies, which is not available online. It's printed. You're getting this twice a year, Useful and Beautiful, our wonderful illustrated magazine, edited by Florence Booz, which you get that again in hard copy. It's available online, but only months later. You get the quarterly illustrated magazine from the UK William Morris Society, not available online. Invitations to these events. We're going to be starting in the fall what we're calling member maker events, in which the members of the Morris Society, many of whom are involved in the arts and crafts, will be showcasing their projects. We have a regular online newsletter filled with information. You automatically get associate membership in the UK William Morris Society, which includes discounts to their in-person events for when you're next in London. We should all be able to travel to the UK in the near future. There's a 10% discount on the William Morris UK Tour of Iceland in July 2022. You get a 10% discount on all arts and crafts tours. That's a tour company that takes tours to the United Kingdom. And we have a special 50th anniversary gift for new members, a beautiful hand-printed letterpress William Morris broadside. And finally, as a member, you're not only deepening your knowledge of William Morris, you're also supporting important research through Morris Society publications and fellowships. And you're joining a diverse community of artists, writers, craftspeople, collectors, teachers, scholars, and social activists. This is a club you want to be part of. So thank you for joining us tonight. Monica, thank you again for a really provocative, powerful talk. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for having me.